I think I might hold the world record for fastest time a new homeowner ever got targeted by a power-drunk HOA president. But I can guarantee I'm the only person who's ever had their door nearly kicked in at 300 a.m. by a woman with a fake master key and a personal vendetta. Yeah, that actually happened. And let me tell you, if you've ever felt like suburban life was just a little too quiet, be careful what you wish for. This story is what happens when a person moves in for some peace and quiet and winds up in a cold war over yard decor and dog toys with a little felony fraud thrown in for flavor. So grab a drink, pull up a chair, and before we dive in, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Because I swear stories like this must be happening everywhere, and I'd love to know I'm not alone. My saga started with a mistake wanting a quiet life. The night it all hit the fan, it wasn't even a dramatic bang or anything. It was the tiniest crunch of gravel on my driveway at 3:17 a.m., barely loud enough for a normal person to notice, but I'm not most people and my dogs sure aren't. Ghost, my old German shepherd, vibrated with this low professional hum from his chest like a living alarm system. Shadow, my Belgian Malinois, just flicked his ears and stared at the door, all tense potential. Instinct kicked in. Years of training you just don't lose. I slipped out of bed, barely breathing, and peeked out the window. That's when I saw it, a white Range Rover engine off, parked just beyond my property line, and a short, round figure marching up my walkway like she was on a mission from God. Of course, it was Brenda, the neighborhood's self-appointed queen, and apparently the star of my own personal horror movie. Through my camera feed, I watched her fumble with a ring of keys under my porch light, muttering about illegal modifications and fines, trying each one in my lock. She honestly thought she had a master key to my house. When it didn't work, her frustration boiled over. She shook the doorknob, then balled up her fist and started pounding like she was the police. That was Ghost and Shadow's cue, one deep bark, one wild, high-pitched echo, and suddenly Brenda was screeching at the top of her lungs about vicious animals and emergency inspections. When she finally kicked the door with her designer sneaker and yelled for me to let her in, I swear something in me just clicked. You know that moment when you realize, yep, this is how wars start. That was mine. But to really get why I was dealing with a 300 a.m. siege, we've got to rewind 6 months back to when I bought this place. I just retired from a 15-year run as a military K-9 handler, ready for some peace with my 2 decorated partners. The house was a simple ranch at the end of a cul-de-sac with a half-acre yard and a privacy fence, exactly the kind of place where 2 working dogs could finally nap in the sun and not worry about anything but squirrels. For 8 blissful days, it was heaven. On day 9, Brenda introduced herself, or more accurately, issued her first command. She pulled up in that Range Rover, rolled down the window, and peered at me like I was a bug under her magnifying glass. "You must be the new owner," she said, no question mark. Then she handed me a 4-inch binder of rules that would put the U.S. tax code to shame and gave me a verbal warning for having my trash cans out after 900 a.m. By the way, collection was at 7. Right then, Shadow woofed at her a little canine hello, and Brenda glared at him like he'd committed a felony. "We're not a big dog community, you understand," she said, pushing the binder at me, already ready to list every violation she expected I'd rack up. "All waste must be disposed of immediately. No excessive noise. Leash at all times. You get the idea. If you're thinking, wow, she sounds fun at parties, you'd be wrong. Brenda would ban parties if she could." I made the rookie mistake of actually flipping through the binder and found a bureaucratic fever dream grass could be no taller than 3 inches but no shorter than 2. And front doors were strictly limited to the holy trinity of beige taupe or darker beige. It was like living in an HOA-run prison with better landscaping. A week later, Brenda sent her first salvo, a violation for yard clutter, which turned out to be Ghost's rubber Kong toy in the grass. $50 for a dog toy. I paid it just to see what she'd do next. What she did was double down. Next, came a fine for excessive noise from my aggressive dogs, even though my cameras and decibel meter proved they barked less than the yappy white terrier 2 doors down. So I started collecting evidence because if there's one thing military life teaches you, it's to document everything. Every fine, every letter, every decibel was recorded and cataloged. But then came the twist. Brenda's newsletter announced a community master key system. Everyone in the HOA was required to hand over a copy of their house key for emergency access. Non-compliance, $25 a day. I checked the bylaws. Nowhere did it say anything about mandatory keys. So I went to the county courthouse and dug up the original covenants. What Brenda had distributed was doctored. She'd literally rewritten the bylaws, forging in a clause that allowed her access to the inside of our homes, not just the yards. It was so brazen it almost made me laugh. I needed backup. Enter Dave, a quiet, retired accountant 3 houses down. Over some beer, I laid out the fake bylaws and all my violation notices. Dave went pale, said he'd suspected Brenda was crooked but hadn't realized how deep it went. He offered to audit the HOA finances if I could get the records. Cue legal letters and more stonewalling until I finally got a box of financial docs so disorganized it could only have been intentional. Dave found the smoking gun. A company called Suburban Solutions LLC, which Brenda owned, was getting thousands each month for consulting services. Over 3 years, she'd paid herself over $80,000 out of HOA funds. We were looking at embezzlement, mail fraud, forgery, the works. I let the master key deadline pass. Brenda fined me daily, and every time I responded with polite legalistic emails CCing the whole board attaching scans of the real bylaws. She lost it. Her emails went from stern to desperate, threatening liens and community sanctions. I saved everything just waiting for her to go too far. And she did. The night she came to my house, tried her fake keys, then kicked my door, she handed me everything I needed on a silver platter. I called 911, kept it calm, made sure to mention I was a retired canine handler with 2 trained dogs who were secure but agitated. Police showed up in minutes. Brenda fled, but I had video, audio, and now a police report for attempted unlawful entry and vandalism. The next morning, we hit DEFCON 1, sent a formal notice to all 120 homeowners, called an emergency meeting at the clubhouse, and got the signatures needed for a vote of no confidence. That night, the place was packed. Brenda Carroll and Gary the board tried to brush it off, but you could feel the mood shift. I projected the evidence-forged bylaws, doctored documents, payment records, the shell company. Then I played the porch video timestamp, and all Brenda caught on camera keys kicking the works. The crowd was stunned. Brenda tried to sputter out an excuse, but no one was buying it. The vote was unanimous. The whole board was out. Dave was made interim president, and the new board hired an outside firm. By the time they were done, Brenda's embezzlement tally was closer to $95,000. The DA pressed charges. Brenda had to sell her Range Rover just to cover legal fees. 6 months later, her house was sold at a loss and she and her husband vanished. Now, the HOA is run by people who care about the actual community, not just who has the greenest grass. The rules fit on 10 pages, not 4 inches of binder. My dogs nap in the sun, and I finally get that quiet life I wanted. But I'll tell you, this suburban peace isn't about avoiding conflict. It's about standing your ground and exposing the people who count on everyone else keeping their heads down. So here's the part where I turn it over to you. Do you think I went too far, or did I do what any sane person would? Ever had your own HOA nightmare? Or maybe you think Brenda had a point. Drop your story or your take below. Because if there's one thing I learned, it's that when you fight for what's right, you're never really fighting alone.